Greetings and salutations, viewers. We're back for another episode of World End Economica. Last time round, we actually met with Barton, and he imparted some words of wisdom to us. For better or worse. Now it's time to see what Hal is going to do with all of that. He's been taught some interesting lessons last time round that I don't know how he's going to implement. And being told he should break up with Hagana in regards to being partners, that did not go over very well. But then again, business is business. So, you know what? Let's jump right in. Let's see how this plays out. What is Hal going to do? See ya. That way of parting was really awesome. I looked at Barton's car until it blended in with the other cars, then started walking back. I understood the principles under which I operated. My goal was also clear as day. Therefore, I knew the solution to my problem. I trudged along to the church. Looked like time was a little past 2. It was a time period where I'd get a scolding from the police if I started loitering around. I wasn't really feeling it, but I heaved a big sigh and bounced from rooftop to rooftop until I made it to the church. Therefore, it was by chance that I managed to see it. If I had just walked the way I was along the street, I would have made it back to the church. As I was about to jump down from the neighbor's roof onto the church's roof, I could sort of see the yard on the 3rd floor. Lisa would have been working at the Chinese restaurant, and no one else would have been around. It had to be Hagana. Furthermore, since the napping set Lisa provided for Hagana was all soft, pure white cushions and blankets, the black-clad Hagana really stood out. I had discovered the sleeping Hagana when I lowered myself onto the 3rd floor yard. She really took my suggestion to rest to heart and was actually resting. Even if it was obvious that she was trying to copy all of my actions, I knew she was dead serious in her own way of trying to adjust the values. Due to air circulation on the moon, sometimes the wind did blow. At that moment came a wind, and it slowly caressed the scene. The lilies fluttered, the leaves in the big tree fluttered, and Hagana's bangs fluttered. When she was sleeping, she really was an ordinary girl. Furthermore, when I looked closer, she was hugging her terminal tightly while sleeping. A bit further away from her lay 2 cups. Perhaps Chris had come over during the day and studied with her. Anyone, even if they were not Hagana, would want to protect this tranquil lifestyle, for example, by trying to help out the frantically hard-working children like Chris. According to Barton, if someone used the same methods as quants, these methods would get outdated, and their performance would drop. In other words, if I were to call it off between us, then Hagana would eventually lose a way to earn money. Burying herself in cushions and grunting like a baby occasionally, she was sound asleep. A single person who came here because she was sold, and she was swallowed up by the unfairness of the world. However, I had to chase my own dreams. From that, Barton was a stepping stone I definitely needed. Therefore, I decided I could only do this. I walked over to Hagana and looked down at her sleeping face. Hagana frowned a bit at the slight reduction of light hitting her and woke up. Once she noticed it was me, she rubbed her eyes and then checked her skirt awkwardly. When we first met, she never cared about getting peeked on from below.
What?
She squinted at me and asked. And here was what I said. Let's get first in the investment contest.
Eh?
Haganah replied. Wasn't the most important thing the debt that everyone had? She looked like she was about to respond with that, but I was thinking about something totally different. If she got the contest money, then she'd be able to live her life freely until she could enter college. No matter how hard it is for them to live on their own, 200,000 mules should be plenty. If her program could just make some money for a bit longer, then what should be prioritized would be the investment contest that was coming to a close soon. The other people's debts could just be paid back slowly. Haganah's program would be able to hold out until then, right? And once that happened, I could part ways with Haganah and head over to Barton.
What's the reason?
Cutting off the questioning Haganah, I replied, "Please." She got herself up from the cushions and was stunned. The lunar wind blew warmly and slowly. Haganah's beautiful hair swayed in the wind.
Is it something important to you?
She asked very directly. Even if I had lied and said it was, wouldn't she simply accept it and nod? That was probably the case. The reason she fell upon Lisa's church was probably because she had a mean face, doubted everything, and yet was unable to stand on her own. However, it was something important to me. There was no lie there. That's correct. Haganah stared at me. Then she looked away, rubbed the hem of her skirt gently, and looked back up.
I see.
Haganah stood up. Perhaps she was buried too deeply in the cushions while sleeping, because as soon as she stood up, she had a very strong and distinctive scent.
We are really far behind, Mr. Troche.
Haganah pointed out. Here was my reply. We'll just have to catch up to him. And to my words, Haganah appeared to have laughed lightly.
Transition.
Since trading in the real market up until now led to tidy profits that no one could complain about, there was only so much that could be earned by winning the investment contest from Haganah's point of view. Currently, including funds entrusted to us, my own capital, and the amount I was going to give to Haganah, the total amount swelled to 600,000 mules. In other words, a 10% increase would be 60,000 mules in profit, and 20% of that would end up being 12,000 mules for myself. Haganah's share of 20% would come out of the 2,400 mules. And even if we did poorly, a 10% profit was doable in a day. The general outlook on my assets put me at 180,000 mules. I started out with 70,000 mules and made a profit of 110,000 mules. 20% of that was Haganah's share, so at present Haganah's compensation was about 30,000 mules. In other words, Haganah was only 20,000 mules away from being able to completely pay off Lisa's loan. At the current pace of 3,000 to 4,000 mules in profit each day, Quick and Dirty made it so that it wouldn't even take 10 days to accomplish the goal. On top of that, in terms of actual trading, we weren't the only ones who profited. She could greatly help Chris, who had no hope of getting into a university because she had no money despite having a gifted intellect, as well as the residents of the outer sections struggling with debt. It was natural to think that Haganah was more focused on that than the investment contest itself. It was completely rational. With the investment contest, no matter how well you did, the prize money was 200,000 mools. After paying off Lisa's 50,000 mool loan, we'd split the difference. Naturally, that was no small amount of money, but real-world trading had no restrictions on how many days you could trade. If you spent more time at it, then that time spent would lead to greater profits and an increase in the number of people who could be helped. Nevertheless, Hagana complied with my wishes and focused on the contest. She didn't even ask for reasons. She didn't even know that I had intended to give the 200,000 mool prize money entirely to her. Naturally, I didn't mention that after the contest ended in the near future, I would cut ties with Hagana and work with Barton. Without knowing, and without wanting to know, Hagana had offered to help me. Though I wondered if she knew that I was hiding something from her. It was possible that she wasn't the type to think about such things. Overdevelop those skills in mathematics and everything else falls on the wayside, as Barton said it. I half believed those words, and I also believed in something entirely different. The day after Hagana and I decided that we'd focus on the investment contest, we had really stayed focused. That day was supposed to be a day off, but we quickly got to trading in the living room and achieved a virtual 2 million mools in profit. Hagana's program was a powerful weapon, making it feel like taking a test while knowing all the answers, and thus it made trading successful. It did scare me that someday a program might make me obsolete. However, in pursuing a goal, this was a more reassuring tool than anything out there for facing that challenge and pushing forward. Besides, recently, Hagana had become concerned about my physical well-being and seemed to have a lot of questions to ask. Whether trading was over or not, I was inundated with questions. I was surprised that she wanted to know so much, but I wondered whether or not I could beat that much zeal. Even as the day waned, without realizing it, Hagana and I would look into our computers and have discussions in a completely dark living room. We came back to our senses only when Lisa returned from the Lunar Chinese restaurant and turned on the lights in the living room. Lisa was honestly pleased that I was better again. But what really bothered me the most was when Lisa turned to Hagana and said,
"Good for you too,"
to her. Hagana was as surprised as I was, and she looked between Lisa and me repeatedly. Then I saw that her face was red. She looked down and nodded. This was the other half of the reason Hagana offered to listen to my request. More than I had imagined, Hagana had forgiven me. By nature, she was very sincere. She knew that Lisa could see that she was overdoing it a bit. It's not far-fetched to say that this was thanks for helping Hagana make use of her mathematical abilities in a real-world setting. But I could see that, to Hagana, this was a simple matter of thanks. Even that day, as if a bath would be a waste of time, she would drag on discussions with me while fiddling with the numerical output of her program, until Lisa finally got mad and forced her to go. Not even 5 minutes would elapse before she'd come right back out. This time she made sure to put on her pajamas, but she didn't take the time to dry her wet hair. Lisa stopped taking any chances and would proceed to wipe Hagana's hair with a bath towel, then finish by wrapping it around her hair. The table in the living room was lined up with work materials, and I could see the nape of Hagana's neck with her hair bundled up like that. The strands of her hair and her white, slender neck made her look like a really beautiful and mature woman. Late at night, after Lisa's growing impatience forced me to return to my room, I mailed Barton. Due to various circumstances, please wait until the end of the investment contest for a response. Barton's response came immediately in the contest, and the contents said, "Not a problem." Despite Barton being a wealthy man who went in and out of the Grand Central Hotel and calmly rode around in a high-class limousine, he didn't seem to exhibit any arrogance or domineering nature. He was a man with a big heart who dealt with me as an individual. I had an inkling more or less of how exhausting it was working at Schrödinger Street based on rumors on the net and books. Not even being treated as a human being and having barely any time to sleep. There were only a small number of people with high-paying salaries, and a whole lot of them were often fired after 1 or 2 years. In return, when they hit it big, the returns were massive. However, there were ways to bypass the common route where you gathered up capital and, at your own discretion, invested in a fund and managed it. One could work solo and still amass a fortune. That reason was why it was normal practice for people to join a major financial institution on Schrödinger Street. It was to build up knowledge and then go solo afterwards. That was why there was probably no more fortuitous situation than training under Barton's wing. If you looked up the Britannica on the net, it was number 32 on the list of 5,000 top investment funds in the world by percentage return. The total assets under management were 30 billion mools, while Barton's annual salary was 100 million mools. If I were to train under Barton and then study more beyond that after going solo, I could earn more than Barton, and possibly surpass him as well. The number 1 fund manager made 2 billion mools a year. In just a few years' time, the amount of money made wouldn't be any different from the budget of a small country. By that time, I would have many connections and anything would be possible. A dream. A dream about coming upon the undiscovered country. For that dream, I must cut ties with Haganah. On the other hand, without me around, Haganah's investment program would lose momentum and cease being able to earn her money. I couldn't pick both. That was why it was necessary to acquire the 200,000 mool prize money in the investment contest.
Morning.
We ran into each other by chance after waking up in the morning. Haganah was the first to issue a clear greeting. "Ah," I replied as we both went into the living room. In the living room, Lisa had prepared breakfast. When she saw Haganah and me come in at the same time, she smiled gently.
Today there are 72 stocks. Volatility is really high, and there were a number of stocks with large price fluctuations. I want you to be careful.
I got it. I'm no amateur. I said that while I chewed on some toast, and I knew that Lisa was holding back laughter while she held a coffee cup by the sink.
Well, weren't you being cheeky?
Was what she really wanted to say, I suppose. But Barton had called out to me, seeing my impressive trading skills. Even now, I was entrusted with many people's money and reaping large profits. Even though that was thanks to Haganah's program, the basis for that program was based on my judgment. Thus, I didn't think it was a bluff. This was the foundation of confidence. Haganah no longer sat at the other end of the table. She was now always sitting beside me as we ate. Sitting there next to me, Hagana asked a question.
If you aren't an amateur, then what are you?
Sarcasm? No, I didn't think so. I replied to the expressionless Hagana. An investor.
An investor?
But I don't intend to use the money I stole from my mother. I threw those words directly at Hagana. It seemed that Hagana remembered suddenly, and she looked like she was about to cry as she pulled back. But even then, Hagana kept looking at me and repeated once more, quietly.
An investor?
Yeah. Looking at the display, I said, "We are investors." Next to me, Hagana took a deep breath, which signaled that she understood. As she leaned against the sink, drinking coffee while she watched the exchange between Hagana and me, Lisa smiled without saying a single word and began to wash dishes. "We" was what I said. There was no question who that other person was. "We'll destroy Mr. Troche." I said that as I glanced at Hagana. Hagana's eyes were unwavering as she nodded, like she was staring down a target in a mafia movie. With 500 million mools of funds in the virtual market, 3 times with margin trading would be 1.5 billion mools. I was well aware of the fact that it would be impossible, were this to be the real market, to shift such a massive sum of money quickly. However, in the virtual setting, all participants were given 1 million mools to start with. Thanks to that, contestants could get totally immersed in large volume trading in a rough and tumble manner. If that became the case, then I would really be at an uncontested advantage. With my perspective on the program now changed, I felt like a fish released in water, able to swim around the market with total freedom. On top of that, the fund totals and rankings were updated every minute of every day, so I was thankful that I didn't have to be wary of high rollers like in a casino. It was completely possible in reality for a single person out there with a disgustingly large amount of money to mow down the competition. That was the true form of the demons who lurked in the first 10 minutes of trading. Here and there I had seen some come together like piranhas ready to tear apart game, but in my opinion, what was anticipated was so clearly obvious that it would be difficult to derive any profit. Lure things in with bait, and when they came close, attack. With Hagana's program, I knew how much prices had to move before people using similar programs to trade would flock to the stock. Each transaction would yield 0.3 or 0.5%, which wasn't much in terms of profit. The time spent looking over at Hagana's terminal was precious, and before long, Hagana started to read the stocks out loud. On top of that, Hagana in her own way had a strong personality and did not know anything about taking it easy. As I listened to her raging words, I started trading like crazy, so that even the time to breathe seemed precious. Naturally, it destroyed me. The fatigue was no different from torture. In the instant that the morning's trading was completed, I looked straight up as if my computer gave me an electric shock. Taking a deep breath, I fell back against the chair without another thought. I couldn't move an inch. I couldn't utter a single word. Even with my eyes closed, the numbers swirled in my head. The necessity to do one thing or another caused a feeling of unease to swirl around in my mind. But it wasn't because I was not feeling well. Facing my objective, no matter what tools I used, it was clear what I had to do. After all, what I was doing was no different from when I was suffering before. In fact, the intensity was much higher. But I wasn't feeling bad about it. Furthermore, 3 days after we started concentrating on the investment contest, Hagana brought me a damp towel warmed in the microwave, since I was slumped on my back staring at the ceiling. I imagined Lisa had suggested she do that, but I was really happy she did. Even though trading was over, she didn't get up from her chair. She continued to sit next to me, tapping away at her terminal. Hagana herself also needed a rest, so she closed her eyes at times. It was very quiet, even though we only looked at each other when we talked. Somehow, it felt very friendly. I knew we were both running towards the same destination. Once the break was over, we eat, proceed with the afternoon trading, and then limp on until dinner, exhausted to the point of not being able to stand. At dinner, we could return to being human again, with Lisa providing some light banter while Hagana stayed by my side, making improvements to her program. Our virtual funds were increasing in 10 million intervals. Unsurprisingly, Mr. Troche, who had an MBA from Harvard University, completely controlled the market. A week before we had to stop trading, he had amassed 360 million mools through his trades. While the increase in assets was rather shocking, I said to myself that it wasn't an impossible plateau to reach. But to close all positions with such precision was impressive of him, I thought. With the market this frantic, there was a chance prices would go up, but also a chance you'd lose the shirt off your back. Specifically, if you had Mr. Troche's level of assets, there was a possibility you could get targeted, with what trades you were making analyzed. There were already a number of people who had been targeted and had fallen tremendously in the rankings. The secret to how that worked was that even for people who had finished their trading but had unclosed positions, the amount of money displayed next to the rankings would change as the stocks moved every day. Were someone to use a program like Hagana's, one could ferret out those stocks by looking at all available stocks and computing possible candidates by comparing the price fluctuations of stocks with the movements of the fortunes of the top-ranked participants. After that, all that would be necessary would be to join forces with others to do some reverse trading. We were sitting in 4th place at 150 million mools, with the distance to 2nd place being 100 million mools, and 3rd place being about half that amount of money. Technically, there was 1 week left, but there was a Sunday in between, which made for 6 actual days of trading possible, with Sunday in the middle. After trading on Monday and Tuesday, it would all end at 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Hagana and I mustered all our available strength. The moment a loss was taken due to carelessly not heeding a warning from the program, Hagana would lash out with that foot of hers. And when she misread something about certain stocks, I'd yell at her afterwards. Even then, things didn't turn gloomy. I knew that Lisa would become excited many times during all of this, but it never made things worse. 30 million moves of profit on Thursday, and 20 million mools on Friday put us just at 200 million mools, passing the guy at 3rd place by a narrow margin with only 40 million mools between us and 2nd place. There was still the 160 million mool difference between us and Mr. Troche. For Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we had to increase our total gain by 80% at all costs. We were trading completely with full leverage, so it was no different from having 600 million mools at our disposal. So all we had to do was achieve a real return of 27%. returns of 10%, 10%, and 10% would be more than sufficient. But, based on the performance on Thursday and Friday, whether this was possible or not was unclear. Honestly, we were trading at an unprecedented level. We were pushing ourselves with all our might, and Hagana was whittling down her sleeping hours. She'd camp out, waiting for Lisa to go to bed, then sneak into my room, working on improving the program until morning. There were times where she would be sleeping like a log beside me. Also, she was sleep-deprived a lot more, and would drop her chopsticks or spoon more often during meals. We both knew we were nearing our limits. However, Lisa wouldn't object. There was no room for her to do so. On Saturday, at the end of our discussion, we thought about taking on more risk. Fiddling with the numbers on the program in order to select a number of stocks with large price fluctuations, we selected more speculative stocks. For the ones with large price fluctuations, many were selected through durations based off the mathematical principles Hagana utilized. It was an unattainable region, much like the concept Barton had spoke of, a region of extreme rises and falls where human sentiment could clearly be seen. In the midst of all this tension, Hagana and I began Saturday's trading. We felt strong progress as I was suddenly able to knock down the feeling of tension from feeling the time crunch. Hagana went so far as to borrow Lisa's terminal and ask Soral to copy the program. During trading, the program's content was updated in real time. Doing all this while being sleep-deprived and exhausted. We weren't looking so healthy. But even so, at the end of Saturday, when she saw that we had managed to hit 60 million mools in profit, even Hagana was all smiles. For that moment, we were in second place. And we are gonna have to stop things there. That means 3 trading days left in this financial contest. And we have just hit second place. All we have to do is defeat Mr. Trosh in 3 days. Can we do it? We'll have to find out next time. As always, thank you for joining me. I hope you're having fun. By all means, post in the comments below, do you think they'll be able to pull it off? Or in the last 3 days, are they going to burn out fully? I sincerely hope not, but they are pushing themselves hard, harder than they ever have. Stamina can only last so long. We're gonna have to find out next time how that all goes down. So until next time, go play some video games of your own. Go be creative, go write, go play, go have some fun. And I'll see you all next time.